Welcome to the Hunt Fish Travel podcast, the first and longest running female hosted hunting podcast. She's got a touch of buck fever. It's hot coffee at 5 a.m. and cold beer at 5 p.m. Soggy sandwiches and a drop time. But first, she's helping you navigate your trip of a lifetime. And now, here's your hostess, Carrie Zilka.
Welcome to the Hunt Fish Travel podcast. I am your hostess, Carrie Zilka. This week we're talking to Tom Indrebo about hunting big bucks. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. If you're crunched for time, I recommend Stitcher Radio. It has a nifty play at a 2x speed option. Super handy for when you want to listen to a 40-minute episode, but you only have a 20-minute drive to work. Don't forget to tell all your friends about the show. It means the world to me when you help me get the word out. The easiest place to share it, as well as the show notes for this episode, can be found at the website HuntFishTravel.net under the show tab. Or the direct link is www.cz.net/EP143. This episode is brought to you by Real Avid. If you're looking for my favorite shotgun tool, check it out at realavid.com. It's also brought to you by Cryptic. Cryptic Outdoors has probably one of the best outdoor women's camo lines that I've ever seen. I recently got a few items and I put them on, and number one, it's like butter. It feels like it's so soft and quiet. It fits perfectly, and as a woman, that's pretty important. I'm really excited to get out this weekend for opening day and give it a shot. Welcome to the Hunt Fish Travel podcast. I am your hostess, Carrie Zilka. This week we're talking to Tom Indrebo of Bluff Country Bucks about hunting big bucks in Buffalo County, because that is my current favorite subject. Tom, welcome to the show. This is the first time I've had you on the podcast, isn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's crazy. Well, I'm glad that you are taking the time.
Well, I'm glad to be on it.
Why don't we tell the listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Well, we run an outfitting business, which started 25 years ago, and kind of all just took off on me. And it was an accident. I bought a place. I was losing hunting ground to leasing, and I bought a farm, and I was an avid bow hunter. And I thought, well, if I don't buy some land, I'm not going to have a place to hunt. And ended up buying a farm, and the next year I had guys coming, knocking on the door, wanting to hunt, and one thing led to another, and I haven't hunted since I've been here. I get to hunt every day, but I haven't shot a deer. I hunt for everybody else, but we do take, probably around 25 Pope and Young deer every year, Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett, something, in the trophy category, and basically run an outfitting business, and I knew, what was fun for me when I went hunting, and I tried to make that for the hunters. Most of my hunters at this point have come back every year because they know there's big bucks here, and I work at it year round, basically, put in food plots and work on stands and watering holes. We have about 35 watering holes that we put in over the years, and access trails into the hills, and it's been a fun thing. I really enjoy it, and been a challenge, and I'm still learning about deer, and I think that's why I keep doing it, because that's a challenge of it.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine that it's a total learning process as you go, because there's always different stuff happening and always new stuff to try. There's always new tactics coming out. And
yeah, I guess that's a fun part of it for me, and I guess that's how I get my fun out of it, is what I learn about it. And I didn't realize it when I started doing this, as I often wondered, how can I get guys on, big deer and Pope and Young deer and Boone and Crockett deer. And what I didn't really realize was that once I started and I had a number of hunters, that once you have, a dozen hunters in the woods every day, sitting stands that you set up and stuff over the years, you learn like 12 times faster than you would if it was just you out there hunting, So that's been the fun part for me. That's been an ongoing study kind of. And I run a lot of trail cameras, and and we've been able to follow quite a few deer for, up to 10 years old. So that's been really fun too. We really learned a lot from those deer over the years, and the personality in bucks, once they get to be 3-4 years old, they change. They're a different animal than they are when they're, 1, 2, or first 1, 2, and 3 years old.
Really? Do you think just because they're like smarter, or?
They actually live a different lifestyle kind of at that point. Yeah, I guess maybe you could say it's a learned experience. I don't know, but they actually become more as the season changes. Our season in Wisconsin here opens in September, mid-September. A lot of states opens in October, and as the season progresses, on through October, November, and December, they go through different stages. So about every 2 weeks during the hunting season, you're kind of hunting them differently as they change, and they start out in mid-September, like in August, September, they're on their summer feed, and the bucks are in groups, bachelor groups, and that's a good time to really get an inventory of what's out there and run cameras at that time, and we do a lot of filming too with telephoto lenses and stuff, and when they're grouped up like that, you can see quite a few of the bucks in the area. Once when season opens mid-September, it's a really good time to hunt. We found out it used to be that everybody wanted to hunt the rut, but September is a very good time to hunt because they are concentrated in small areas. They don't move very far. They just bed, get up and eat and lay down, so they're right close to food sources. About the 1st of October, they split up and they leave those food sources and they move into what I call their security areas, which is their home cover where they have found over the years. And the older bucks they move back into that around the 1st of October, become loners, and then just lay up and mostly move at night. There's only a couple windows in October where those big ones come out, but the younger bucks go through a different transition at that time. They actually chase. What happens is some of the older does cycle about the middle of October, and it seems like over the experience over the years, the older bucks will hook up with those does that he has for several years before that, and she leaves scent in an area. Well, then the rest of October, the younger bucks smell that, and they just start digging up that area and making scrapes and rubs, and that's how hub scrapes develop, where there's quite a few bucks working in a certain area where they almost get to be like trails, and they're like spokes of a wheel because they use it so much. But the older bucks, once they hook up with that doe, when she initiates that area, and she might, I've found over the years that some areas they'll come back year after year, but there's no sign there until the night that she comes in there. And I've actually watched them come in and drive their fawns off, actually knock them right on the ground and get on their back feet and drive them away from them, and then urinate in the scrape, and then the big one hooks up with her, but he never comes back there till almost the end of October. In the meantime, all the younger bucks scent that and come in there and keep working it up. So that's when you're hunting, you see a lot of sign in an area, a lot of scrapes and stuff, and most hunters get pretty excited over that because in October, big black fresh scrapes and numbers of them, in especially primary scrape areas, there is a lot of bucks using that, but they're younger bucks. The older bucks are still laying up, and they make one trip about through there later in October, on the average probably around the 28th, and they'll downwind those areas that those younger bucks have worked up, and then they'll go past it, come back, and then if everything seems right, they'll go into it and they'll actually work the scrapes. And they usually one day they'll take a day and they'll make a route from one ridge to the next and check all those areas that they're going to use the following week once they get in the 1st of November and the rut kicks in. Then they actually use those scrapes. When they leave the first doe, they get right back on that route and they come in and downwind those scrapes that they'd worked up a week before. And see if estrus doe has been there or whatever. If they don't find one, they just move on to the next one and do the same thing. So the older bucks are very deliberate, and there's very small windows that you have an opportunity to take a big buck. You can shoot younger bucks just about every day, especially during September, October, and even November. But most of the hunters that come here, see bucks and have opportunities of bucks every day. Most of them just like hunting and choose to try to get a bigger buck than they've shot before. So that's kind of the fun part about it. So they're passing up a lot of deer when they are hunting.
So, okay, I have like 9,000 questions now. So because you just dumped a whole lot of information that I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so really you do have a small window to take that big buck. So question number one, where are those bucks then? Where are they hanging out, do you think, through most of October until about the 28th? Are they mostly nocturnal then, or are they just like...
Yes, I followed quite a few of them and run cameras and stuff, and follow them from year to year. And they have a spot that it's their safety spot where they lay, and they can... Here we have big bluff country and they'll lay out on maybe a little plateau or something where they can see around all below them, and it's all thick brush and and timber behind them. So there's really no way to approach them. They come out. I've followed some of them, got them on camera every single night in the same spot where they've come out to feed, and they're only coming out through the thick stuff about 50 yards from where they're laying, and they don't travel a very big distance at that time. They're real homebodies, and they actually come out and feed probably an hour after dark, and then about midnight or so they'll go to one of the ponds that's close by and spend maybe 2 to 3 hours around that. And then by probably 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning, they're back in their security spot bedded again. So at that time they're hard to get. There's no way to get to them without bumping them, and they have escape routes that they go, and you might not ever even see them or whatever. But sometimes you can find those bedrooms, so to speak, or safety spots they lay in early in the year when all the leaves are off, like about turkey hunting time or something. I do a lot of scouting then, and you can find those spots and kind of see where they come in and go out of those spots, and you're on a real big buck or an older deer. Those windows are, I would say that the one day, and it's usually right around the October 26th, it seems like, where they're on the feet moving. And actually, how I caught on to that, with a lot of the world-class bucks that have been hit by cars in Illinois and Minnesota and different states were hit on the 26th about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, midday, and I thought, that's kind of a coincidence. And over the years, I used to keep records on all that stuff on big bucks, and there was kind of a window there where the bigger ones were moving at that time, and I was wondering why, really. And then it started to make sense after years of really, studying them. And
would it make sense then to find... So say you have a new hunter coming in. How do they know which buck is the mature or the dominant buck that's living in that area? Because if you're seeing a bunch of bucks every day and they're good-sized shooter bucks, but how do you know that there's a bigger one? Is there a way to tell? Do they leave certain sign behind?
If you look at the season, I'll say one other thing here, that a lot of the bucks, if the guy's running cameras on their properties like throughout the summer and into the fall, all the bucks the majority of bucks, I would say 90% of them or more, that you would film in a bachelor group in the summer, come October, they might not be on your property. They might be 1 to 3 miles away, because when they break up and split up and return back to their home area, then they move there. They move out. So where you get those bucks on and are seeing them in the summer, they're relocating about October 1st. And so that's part of it. But then for a big buck, what will happen is that the bigger bucks are very much homebodies throughout October. Once the rut starts in November, then they hook up with does, and depending on how many does are in the area or your buck to doe ratio, if they don't have to go very far to find a doe, probably 80% of all the does are bred in a window in November of probably the 10th through the 15th. They're right in there. A large number of them are bred at that time. When it gets toward the end of that breeding time, where most of them have been bred already, there's only a few coming in, then those bucks are more vulnerable because the big bucks, they're on their feet, and they'll move 6 to 8 miles in a night, and they'll return back to their home area. But if they don't find the doe, they keep going. I've been able to follow some that I had on my camera and saw them at 4 o'clock in the afternoon right on my farm here, and had a friend shoot one 6 miles north of here the next day at 3:30 in the afternoon. And that was just before Thanksgiving, and the rut was just about winding down, and there wasn't a lot of does that were coming in anymore. So he just took off and he was going looking, So he just kept moving but that's a pretty common deal. So a bigger buck is probably more vulnerable toward the end of the rut.
Okay. That's what I was just going to ask, if you thought that it would be better if you're really going after the dominant buck, the big one, probably have more of a chance towards the end of the rut than in the beginning. Do you think
for a big buck? And the other thing is, if most people have a farm they hunt or a hunting spot that they hunt on, that's a time when a buck could come from miles away and show up on your farm.
So you could just get lucky.
Or in October, he's not going to show up there. He's going to be locked down in his home cover area. So
then do you recommend, so say you have a hunter who wants to take one doe and one buck in a year. Would you suggest they hunt the does earlier in the season or hunt the does later in the season?
Well, it depends on what area they're in. It varies so much as the numbers of deer in areas. And, here there's a lot of deer, so it doesn't matter too much. Depending on if he doesn't have a lot of does on his property where he hunts, then I would try for that buck and use the rut and the doe to bring them to you, and then maybe harvest her later. If you have a lot of deer in the area, then it wouldn't hurt to take one early either. But I always look at it like that's really your bait for bringing in your deer when the rut kicks in.
Sure, and you're just shooting yourself in the foot if you're
if you take her out of there, and then he's going to go somewhere else to find one.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if the dominant doe in the area is really setting the stage and she's creating those hub scrapes, say you're not hunting a farm, say you're hunting public land, or property, you're new to the property, would it make sense to find those doe bedding areas and set up near the bedding areas?
It depends on the time of year that you're hunting it. Early in the year, it would be food sources.
Okay.
And those does are going to be on those food sources, whatever is the prominent feed. And really, it's pretty, pronounced as to, like in Wisconsin here, in our area here, there's a lot of farm fields. So there's alfalfa, and there's clover and chicory, and there's soybeans and corn are the stable crops. So that's what most people are planting for cash crops. So there's a lot of soybeans or corn around. They eat the corn early. The soybeans, they eat the leaves off them in August and September. They're in soybeans. And you could drive around at night, and we filmed quite a few deer in the soybean fields at night. And not after dark, but right before dark, because we'll film them with telephoto lenses, and they're in bachelor groups, and they're out feeding early in the afternoon. So you get to see a lot of deer at that time. But the soybeans that's probably the best overall crop because they feed on the leaves on them. Once the acorns fall and the apples, You can drive around one night and film 30, 40 bucks, and the next night you drive around and lucky if you see one.
Yeah.
And once that, it's like a switch goes off. But they prefer the acorns when they fall, especially white oaks. And when those things are falling, they just leave those fields. And it's just a cycle of they've been eating the leaves on the soybeans. They'll go, if you leave the soybeans standing, that's their, in the winter, that's where they're just going to bunch up in those fields because they eat the soybeans once they're mature and they harden up. But once the apples and the acorns fall, which is about this time of year right now, they just leave those fields. They'll come out and eat clover and that, but it's a secondary food source at that time.
Yeah.
So about the time hunting season starts, they make a move to a different food source.
Okay.
They still will eat alfalfa, clover, and beans, but once the beans turn yellow and freeze, or yellow up, then they leave them.
So say you have a large tract of woods and fields. Say you have 200 acres and you haven't been there all year due to work or whatever, and now it's August and you're like, oh, I better go set some stands. What do you look for as to where you should put a stand?
Well, it depends on what time their season opens. If it opens the 1st of October, you've missed the summer feed, basically the bachelor groups. So what you're looking for then, because even if it opens in September, you only got a couple weeks there, so you're gonna sit a different type of stand, 2 weeks into the season if you're hunting in September than you would, or if you just start October 1st, you're going to be hunting a different type of stand. So what I would look for, like, what happens is when these bucks relocate and leave their summer feed, which would be around the 1st of October, they move back into their security spots, so to speak, and they will mark it. They'll make rubs. And what I would do is go and scout and look for rubs, a real good rub, and that's that buck has returned there, and he marked this area, and that's where he's going to come out and feed at night and that. And you could put a camera on there and see which buck it is. There'd probably be several bucks there, but the bigger one would definitely leave some sign and mark it. So you want to look for that sign and then set up accordingly. You got to remember, he's not going to be moving in October too much in daylight hours, so he's probably going to come out there early on, somewhere between the 11th and the 13th maybe, when one of these older does is going to cycle. That's the only time he's going to probably come out a half hour before light or so. So you, as far as setting a stand there and hunting that particular buck, you're going to see other bucks, and you probably could shoot a buck there almost every night. Another thing that where is a factor in that is once you set up a stand and stuff, and this is a big thing. A lot of guys I see that come hunting here always a question, well, this stand's overhunted, or you're bumping that deer out of there, or whatever. You can bump those deer out of there, if you're hunting that stand every night, and of course what happens is you go set up along the edge or something where they're feeding on beans or alfalfa or whatever. When they come out right about dark, and usually the younger ones will come out first, and then the big one might show up right at dark. But then you got to get down out of your stand and walk across the field and bump them all out of there. If you do that repeatedly, they're not going to come out there till after dark. So the best thing to do there, if you're going to hunt it, don't hunt it every night, but if you're going to hunt it a few times, if you could have a friend or something, or somebody come and pick you up and drive into the field with a vehicle, mm-hmm. and come and run the deer off the field before you get out.
Okay, so that they associate the car and not you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that brings up a good point as far as, say, hunting stand pressure. Now, I know there's two different camps. There's the camp that's like, well, you can't kill it if you're not there, and you have a very small window, like you were saying. So hunt the stand, but like you said, just be careful about coming in and out. But then there's the other camp that says, no, if you hunt it on Monday, you can't hunt it till Saturday again. What camp are you in?
Well, depending on time of year.
Okay.
One mistake guys make is that once the rut starts in November, they see a big buck or something, and they say, well, I don't want to bump him. I'm going to stay out of there for a day or two and then go back in. He's there right then, and he has a one-track mind, and you're not going to drive him away from a doe or anything. So I have a stand that we've taken over 40 Pope and Youngs off him, and it's up on a big ridge system, and we put in a pond there, or just a watering hole with a small cat, and the guys have sat that. I had a guy come and he sat there, and everybody was in here eating and talking about the deer they saw, and he didn't say much. And then I asked him, I said, well, did you see anything? Yeah, he said, I saw 2 bucks and doe and 2 fawns, but they all looked up right at me and saw me, and they knew that stand was there. I think it's way over hunted. And I said, well, I've got about 300 tree stands out, and I said, that stand that produces, it's November, and bucks that are between does show up on that ridge to check it out, to looking for does that bed out there. So there's different bucks that come through there that have probably never been there all year. And I said that you can overhunt a stand early in the year, maybe in October or something, but in November, I want a guy in that stand every day, because we've had the 2 days that we took 3 Pope and Youngs on that stand, and it's like that's incredible when you think about it. But it's different bucks coming into this big ridge system looking for does, and invariably they're running. They're not looking for food. They don't eat. They run off about 40, 50 pounds, but they got a drink, so they go to that pond, and it's just a magnet for them. But you can't. You're really in November. You can't overhunt the stand.
Excellent. That's so awesome to hear. Because there are some people who are fanatical about it.
About that, yes, yeah.
Awesome. So you have 300 stands. I was just going to ask you, like, is there such a thing as too many stands on a property? I'm guessing the answer is no.
Here's another thing that most people don't think about is that once the rut starts, those are coming into heat on different ridges, and bucks get that scent, they start piling up on those does. So I've seen, it can probably be 7, 8 bucks with a doe before she's going to stand. So those bucks are just going nose on the ground looking for one. Well, so there's areas that all the bucks are in certain little spots where does are coming in. All the rest of the area becomes mostly dead areas, and the does usually will, at that time, they always drive their fawns off. So I tell guys that are hunting, I say, well, if you are sitting there and you see 2 fawns come in and start, or a fawn or 2 fawns just milling around, call me and I'll come pick you up, or get out and come back and we'll move you, because that's not where it's happening.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, the reason I have a lot of stands out too is different times of the year, like I say, about every 2 weeks it kind of changes. So the stands that are, we said early, in 2 weeks we don't use too much. Then we move to other stands. But having that many out, if you're using them right, and the advantage of being an outfitter is if I got a dozen guys out there, invariably 1 or 2 of them are going to be in a stand where a doe is coming into heat. All those bucks are piling up on it. What I do is try to get, if that happens, I try to get every guy that I got hunting around that area real close. So I fill up the stands in a spot that are, because she's not going to move very far, and all those bucks are going to be right with her. So she might only move 50, 100 yards in any direction, and you don't know what direction she's going to go, but she's going to be right there. And that's where all the bucks are going to be. So that's how we end up taking a lot of bucks. Because the trouble is during the peak rut, when a lot of does are coming in, guys will, if it's one guy just going out on his property and he's sitting there, he's sitting in one spot and it's all happening over the hill or somewhere else. He's not seeing any deer because they're all in another little spot. So my advice there would be, if he's going to hunt during the rut, the peak rut, when the does are getting bred, I would scout. I wouldn't just go sit a stand I had up. I would walk till I bumped into some deer, and then have a stand I could set up quick and just get in close to where they are, because they're going to mill back and forth. They're not going to leave they'll spot a very big spot at all. So you can actually bump bucks in at that time, and they're not going to leave that doe.
That's a good point. Do you use deer decoys, like Montana decoys? They have the doe and estrus decoy and stuff. Do you ever use them?
Oh yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, and it's fun. That's a fun thing to do. Yeah, and you can, different times of year, different things too. And deer, like early in the year when they're in bachelor groups and feeding, basically. You could use a decoy and tickle some antlers, or if it's during the chase phase or right before that, when those bucks are probably middle of October, I've had fun, grunting in bucks. And you can a decoy or using terrain to your advantage, where if you set up right on a rise or something, and I've filmed bucks that came in below me and grunted at them, and they hear that, and they look and they study that area up there for probably 4 or 5 minutes, and then just as they turn to go, I grunt at them again, and they swing back, and they didn't see anything because I didn't have a decoy out, but I was right on the crest of a rise in the woods, and they couldn't see over the top. So as soon as they heard that grunt again, he was just turning to leave. And as I grunted, he swung back and came right in and came up, because he thought, well, maybe they're just right over the top, But if you'd had a decoy up there, he would have come in and went right away when he heard it,
Do you have more success with does or buck decoys? Like, say, during the rut. We'll just talk like during the rut.
Well, you could use both, or even a bedded doe, or they will respond they'll come in on a buck decoy too, and they'll I've seen endless video and had it happen too, where they'll come in and just tear up the decoy, they'll just
that would suck. You're like, hey, that sucker's expensive, get away.
And they do have a one-track mind too, so when they do that, I mean, it's hard you can holler at them and whatever, and it's hard to shock them out of when they're mad.
Right. They're like, screw you, blonde girl, I'm busy. That's interesting. I don't really hear a lot of people talking about decoys, and I guess maybe because most of my friends hunt public, and there's no way in hell you would catch me with a deer decoy on public, of course. But I know people who use them swear by them. Yeah.
I mean, they work both ways too. I mean, I've seen them spook deer just as much as they've attracted deer.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of hunters that use them here. I have a lot of decoys here, and they're if they want to use one, they're available for them here. And I just tell them that they can work to your advantage, or they can spook deer too. And we over the years we've videotaped them coming into decoys or decoy spooking them too.
Yeah.
Or
just depends on the deer.
Yeah, and it's the whole. I had one. I think Greg Miller one time was hunting there in the woods. We were rattling deer in across the valley, and when they heard the rattling and they looked, and I mean, it must have been a bigger buck around, because there was a bunch of deer out there feeding on the other side, and the kid come on, and they all put their tails down and turned legs and took off running, like, this other buck was going to come and beat the snot out of them, So.
That's awesome. What do you think are some of the challenges that well, here's a 2-part question. What are some of the challenges that you face as an outfitter working with other people, obviously from all over the country? And what do you think are their biggest challenges?
Well, what I've seen over the years is there's a lot of magazine articles and a lot of over the years I've worked with a lot of writers, and actually a lot of writers have called me on to kind of proofread some of their articles, and some of them, they're very good writers. They just haven't had the experience in the woods on certain subjects, where things that most people, a lot of guys, the hunters that come here that read some of these articles, they take things in the wrong text, and it's not exactly how they believe it to be. And I think the challenge is, and it's fun for me because I'll explain to them situations, and usually I can show them on some of my cameras or, from things that have happened over the years of why it isn't like they think it is, or something. But it's like anybody, you could have 10 people read the same article and have 10 different ideas from it. So a lot of them have preconceived ideas that really, they might be true in one sense, but in many other senses they're not exactly that way, where, things that, if you look at things that, like, one thing was like we put in these ponds and we basically caught on to that was seeing mud holes on these logging roads and stuff that were just pounded with tracks, and said, well, gee, if we put a pond in up on top of this ridge where there's no water and there's a good bedding area, these bucks are going to be in there during the rut looking for those, so they're going to have to go there and water. So that said, well, then we started hunting in early in September when it was warm out, and when we had real warm days, sometimes those ponds there was a lot of bucks on those ponds in the evening.
Yeah.
So, but then things that happened, like a crazy thing was one year for September and October, we had like 4 weeks we had no rain. And so the ponds, we always dug them deep enough so they wouldn't evaporate out, so there was always still some water left in there. And I thought, well, man, these are going to be hot spots because it hasn't rained for 4 weeks, and they're going to go to those ponds. And we were sitting them, and we weren't having any luck. They just weren't showing up there. And I was sitting filming myself one time, and I saw these 2 bucks come in the morning, and they were right under my tree, and I was zooming in on them, and they were licking the water off the leaves, oak leaves, that water droplets. Well, then I realized that what happened was that in the mornings in September and October, it was real foggy in the mornings, and the grass is wet, till 10, 11 o'clock, and that they were getting all the moisture off of the alfalfa and the clover and stuff they were eating at night. They didn't have to go to the ponds. And so the key there was the wind, because if it would have been windy, it would have dried out those fields at night, and it wouldn't have been all that heavy dew in the morning.
Oh, sure.
So with no wind, it was just foggy and heavy dew in the morning, and they'd gotten all the water they needed just all night from eating, so the ponds weren't hot. But if it would have been windy, then the ponds would have been hot.
Yeah, gotcha. Oh, that makes sense. So in a situation like that, so you get up in the morning and you check the temperature and the wind, and you're like, all right, there was no wind last night, so everything's wet. Then do you go and just hunt those food sources pretty heavily?
Depending on time of year it is, I'll say, okay. What time of year is it? Now this year, like here, a lot of this stuff reverts back to the spring, about like when you were here turkey hunting that time. A lot of years, several years, we've had years where everything greens up real early in nice, really real nice spring, and then it'll freeze out. Well, this year here too, all our most of the apple trees froze out, and sometimes we had years where the acorns, all the buds froze off the trees, like in end of April because it was warm early, and they all budded out, and then they froze right at a key time. So then in the fall there's no apples or acorns. So then that makes a big difference in the fall of what the spring was like as to what is your food sources. So then you just always keep that in mind. What are they eating? And, what time of year is it? So, that's the key is, the feed and whether the does are going to be on that feed. And then, of course, the rut is the other factor that they're going to go where those does are. So.
What is your number one tip for late season bucks? So say a bunch of them, the dominant buck in the area or whatever, the big buck has survived the rut, has survived gun season. What would be your number one tip for if you're going to chase them around Christmas?
Okay, if you look on my website, there's a few on there that we've taken late like that. We took 2 nice ones in 2 days. And the key late season is cold weather and food. So cold weather drives them to food earlier. So if you got a pick cornfield or something or that they're feeding on and there's deer coming out there every night, the key temperature seems to be right around 10 degrees. And if it's 10 degrees several days in a row during the day, it's colder at night. And that makes they burn up more energy, so they're going to come out and feed earlier. So they're not going to, a lot of times if it's maybe 20 degrees during the day, they're not out there till right after dark. And they're real patternable at that time because there's only certain food sources that are left kind of if farmers have taken all their crops off and what they can scavenge on, what's left of cornfields or if you got bean fields standing or whatever. But the thing is, too, guys say, well, how can you hunt, if it's really cold? The 2 bucks we took about 4 or 5 years ago, you had them down to within an hour when they were going to be there, and within actually 20 minutes we're just running a camera on the food source where they're coming out to feed, and it was 16 below, and we went in there and actually jumped the buck off there. He was on the camera when he pulled the card when he walked in, and then just waited one night, and 2 days later went in 20 minutes early and shot him in 20 minutes.
That's crazy.
So it was like, cold weather is a key. And I know a lot of hunters that hunt Iowa and different states, and they go every year muzzleloader hunting late season down there. And if it's cold, they always fill up. If it's warm, they don't hardly see any deer. So the cold weather is a factor of really getting them, and probably that's the best time, your best odds of really shooting a good buck, because he's going to show up where those family groups are. You can shoot him. There's been several 200-incher shot here in Wisconsin, even years ago up by Hayward, Russ Warman, Greg Miller shot one south of Eau Claire on his sister's llama farm, and they were shot on the 13th of December, and that's the second rut, and they were both chasing yearling does. So there's a few does that come in at that time. So those big bucks show up at those food sources where those family groups are when those young buck or young does cycle at that time. It's right around the 13th or 14th of December usually. Later, it's all about feed, toward Christmas and in there and into December. So it's all food in cold weather. If it's warm, if it's 20 degrees during the day, your odds go way, way down.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So some of those years where it's unseasonably warm, it's harder to hunt. You really do have some incredible photos on your website. I mean, really nicely taken. Very nice composition. And I know does your son take all these photos? Or are you taking them?
Yeah, when they shoot their deer, he does. Actually, people bring them here from all over, Iowa and all over to take photos. He shoots photos for a lot of different things. But
he does it's really nice because it shows you the quality of Buffalo County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think is the attributing factor to why Buffalo County and Trempealeau County consistently produces trophy-sized bucks?
It's a number of things. The rugged bluff country and steepness and inaccessibility is one factor. There's some say, the limestone stuff in, but most areas can produce big bucks like that. Here, it's a matter of they get through and they got good feed. It's only hardly ever do they ever have winter, problems here. They did a few years ago when we had a mild spring and didn't have any food in the fall, but I've never seen that over the years because it's with the steepness of the hills and stuff. They can always get out of the elements. And what's happened here in Buffalo and Trumpeau too is, over the years, people have realized what trophies come out of here, so they've come in here and bought up the land. About 80% of the land sold in the last 20 years was for trophy hunting. So what they do is they buy some land from farmer. They go in and they put in plant tree plantations, and they put in ponds and food plots, and a lot of these are all farmsteads that there's apple trees all over. So there's tons of feed here, so they got good nutrition, and they can get out of the elements in the valleys and stuff in the winter. So that's a factor. And then most of them started quality deer management, so they're passing up younger bucks, and they're not shooting anything until they get some age on it too. So that's why they're here, and that's why Buffalo actually produces double the Pope and Young and Boone & Crockett, the book deer, every year in Boone & Crockett and Pope and Young record books. It doubles the place it's in second place. So it's way above anything.
Yeah. That's awesome. I know everybody dreams of hunting Buffalo County.
The habitat here has increased dramatically since I moved down here 25 years ago, and at that time it was a lot of pasture land and little farmsteads. All those have grown over, and the people that bought land had come in there. They planted hundreds and hundreds of thousands of trees, acres of trees. Just the habitat has increased probably 10 times in the last 20 years here for what it was 20 years ago. So because everybody that bought land had just went in there and did that, and it's made it ideal for deer, kind of,
So if someone wants to come and hunt Buffalo County, obviously we're going to recommend Bluff Country Bucks. Well, let me ask you, what's the farthest away that someone has come to hunt with you? Like, how far away have they come from?
I have a couple that comes there. They've come 5 years from Slovenia, north of Italy.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, and they'll be here this year too. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. So I bet they come from all over.
Yeah, right. So
they actually have brought other couples with them too when they came. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
What can someone who's interested in coming to hunt with you, what can they expect on a normal day? Obviously, you provide lodging, and you have really cool cabins. Like, obviously, having seen them firsthand, really cool accommodations.
Typical day. It depends on if they're bow hunting or gun hunting. I have a cook that's been, we cooks meals for them and stuff. So he's been here 20 years. And so they come in the morning, have something light to eat, and we'll kind of go over where we, probably all the best spots we think are going to be good for that day, and kind of tell them why and show them maybe on a topo or an aerial photo of where they're going to go. And then we'll take them and get them on a trail that they can follow in with a flashlight, a bright eye trail, or ribbons. And it depends on, we accommodate even, handicapped people too. So we can hunt, we have tree stands, we have ladder stands, we have box blinds, we have ground blinds, whatever they're comfortable with. And then we'll get them in that spot. And then if they got cell phone reception or something, they can, if they get a deer, they can call us, or we'll check on them periodically. If they want to sit all day, they just tell the cook and he'll make them a lunch, the night, they'll tell them the night before at supper, and then he'll have a lunch ready for them in the morning they take with them. If they want to come in, he has a big brunch about 11:30 or so for them. They come back at night. We pick them up after hunting and come in and have a big supper, and then everybody gets to hear everybody's story for the day, which is kind of the fun, the camaraderie, I think, is why it's been the fun and success here, and why so many people come back. It's because they've gotten to know each other over the years of hunting here, and a lot of them became real close friends, and some of them come 3-4 times a year, not in the off season. I just had a bunch of guys from out on the East Coast came here 2 weeks ago and for 4 days, and just to have a little vacation and get away.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So now I know you offer obviously deer hunting, but you also offer turkey hunting. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, turkey hunting mostly, we used to do more hunts than we did, and of course you came turkey hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have room for people to come turkey hunting. I don't promote that or sell that as far as at that time of year I'm busy with other things and springs work and getting stuff too. So, but if a guy's an experienced turkey hunter or want to come, or there's usually somebody around that could go call for him if he isn't experienced, So
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that come over and they might take him out too, or could hunt or whatever. But usually we can accommodate, turkey hunters and that's a fun time of the year too. Turkey hunting is a fun thing. It's guys that get into that are fanatic as deer hunting,
Yeah, no kidding. Do you offer any other kind of hunting, predator hunting or anything like that, or is it just it's mainly deer, right?
Mostly deer hunting, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, we are bumping up against time here. I wanted to hear the Moses story, but if you don't mind, maybe I'll call you later in the year and ask you to tell us the story of Moses and some of the more exciting stories from this year.
Oh, sure. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really cool because something tells me you have really interesting ones.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Especially with people from Slovenia.
Yeah.
Well, tell the listeners where they can find more about you, your website, social media channels, and how they can get in contact with you. Okay,
it's Bluff Country Outfitters. And then I have an email, bluffcountryoutfitters@gmail.com. They can look on my website, and most of my info's on there. So.
Okay. And I'll link to that in the show notes too, so it's easy for people to find you as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, awesome. Well, this has been I love these kind of episodes because I'm so freaking fired up for season to get here. And that'll do it. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to find the show on iTunes. Just search for HuntFishTravel Podcast. Hit the subscribe button. You can also follow me on social media. Just go to huntfishtravel.net and click on the social media icon of your choice. The only one that's not listed there is Periscope. You can always find me on Periscope. Same Twitter handle @CarrieZilka. Until next time.